Hey guys, Matthew. In today's video, I'm going to be explaining to you guys how to craft the Sceptres for the cold conversion seismic trap build. Now, this is a question that I get all the time, and I have a bit of a paste bin explaining how to do it step by step, but I figured I'd make a video because it might be easier to understand and make sure that you don't mess up along the way, because there's a few little tips and tricks along the way that can save you quite a bit of currency if you do them properly. So, first off, to mention that this build does not require these scepters or scepters that are anywhere near good as the ones that I'm showcasing right now on my own build. You can definitely go with some pretty budget stuff when I started off and I converted my build from physical to cold, my scepters were actually Essence of Woe spam scepters until we got Critical Strike Multiplier, and then we crafted Trap Throwing Speed. So it didn't have +1 all spells, it didn't have +1 fizz spells, it didn't have the Hatred stuff, it didn't have the crit multi, or yeah, it actually did have the crit multi. So it was very, very budget stuff, and that was enough all the way to beat the Maven. Basically anything short of the feared or the uber bosses, it was able to down just fine. Of course, when we get into the situation where we want to push to the uber bosses, or for example to the feared, and do it very safely and make it feel good, we'll probably want to go with some +2 scepters. Even then, you don't need anything as close to what I have, so I'll be talking about in this video how to make these scepters with different levels of budgets, because depending on what level of budget you have and how good you want your scepter to be, the method is going to be a little bit different. Alright, so let's start off by the step number 1, which is going to be to take a scepter. Now you're going to want an alternating scepter for Secrets of Suffering. This is what's going to give you Brittle, which is what's going to cap out your critical strike chance. And you're going to want a Sandbar scepter for your second scepter, because the damage penetrates 6% elemental resistance is by far the best mod to have compared to, say, spell damage or elemental damage. So, once you have that, the first thing is going to be the alteration spam for +1 all spells. Now, I do want to say that this is a very rare modifier. As you can see here, the average of actually alt spamming into it is 1800 exalts if you are using augments, and if you're not using augments, it's actually 2,500 alterations. Now, current prices, I believe, are about 6 or 7 alterations per chaos, and currently exalts are about 160 chaos, which means that realistically, you can expect to make this or to alt spam this for roughly 2 to 3 exalts. And this is an average, right? So it's a relatively expensive thing to do. But once you have this, and let's just go ahead and cheat our way here. So we're just going to head and put it on. Once you have this, the thing that you need to decide is whether you're going to go for a budget scepter or an expensive endgame perfect scepter, because they're going to be different on how you craft them. So the first thing you do first off is to isolate this modifier by itself, and the best way to do that is essentially to imprint this. Let's just say that it had a random suffix. So let's just say it had a cold resistance suffix, right? Oh, that's the bench. Let's just say that it had, I don't know, a critical strike chance suffix, something like that. The first thing you want to do is imprint that. Because we want to make sure that we don't have to ever alt spam for this again once we get it the first time. So we are going to use a Chrysic Chimeral imprint, and then we are simply going to look at whether this second modifier here has a caster tag. There's actually no reason to try to annul it if it doesn't have a caster tag. Now, if it does have a caster tag, let's say Critical Strike Chance spells, we would need to annul. However, if it doesn't, let's say for us, it has Critical Strike Chance, we can actually just regal it. Now, the second thing we're going to have to look at is what about that other modifier that we just regaled? Does it have a caster tag? In our case, it does. Now, that means that we have to YOLO annul. However, if it didn't have a caster tag, right? So let's just say that we actually regal again and we get strength. Now, it doesn't have a caster tag, and what this allows us to do is to take advantage of this nice little trick of cannot roll caster modifiers, which is a 5 blessed orb, so an extremely cheap craft compared to, say, the imprints, and we are going to craft on. We're going to craft it on. So cannot roll caster modifiers. Now, what this does is it's going to make it so when we annul, we cannot hit any of the mods that are caster tagged, such as +1. So when we annul, it's guaranteed to hit either this one, which is 5 blessed orbs, or the other modifiers, which we don't care about. So we're just going to keep crafting it on and annulling until we get to the point where we have just this and that, and of course our imprint is still available. Now this is where we are going to decide whether we're going to go for multi-modded scepter or actual true endgame scepters that are going to be perfect. So if we're going to go for multi-modded scepter, it's actually going to be very simple. We're going to change this cannot roll modifier to cannot roll attack modifiers, which is a 1 exalt craft, and we are going to go ahead and harvest craft augment physical. This is going to absolutely guarantee +1 physical spells. Now, Of course, +1 physical is not a common thing to find in Harvest yourself, but as long as you're not in solo self-found, you can buy it on TFT. So I'm going to go ahead and head over to the TFT Discord, which is going to be linked on the description. I'll go to Harvest, want to sell, and then we are going to go to the bottom of the Harvest, want to sell, and then we are going to Control F and type in Og Fizz. Now this is going to look for people who have Og Fizz for sale. And as you can see, there's one an hour ago for 10 exalts. There's another one here for 7 exalts, 7 exalts, 7 exalts, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. Okay, so clearly it's about 7 exalts for an Augment Fizz currently. Now, if you find that there's not really any results for the Og Fizz, you can actually try Augment Fizz. Sometimes this is going to make it so you're going to find more results. So 8x here, 7x, 7x, and so on. Right, and you can also do Augment Physical, so you can try out the different levels of either Og Fizz, Augment Physical, Augment Fizz, or Og Physical. You know, Control F, see whatever you can find. So once you find that and you augment it, you are basically going to have your +2, and then your Sceptre is essentially done. All you're going to have to do is you're going to change your craft to multi-mod, so can have up to 3 crafting modifiers, and then by far the best modifiers are going to be the prefix non-chaos as extra chaos, which comes alongside spell damage as a hybrid modifier, and this is a 1 exalt craft. And then the suffix is going to be our last craft, which is going to be trap throwing speed, which is again by far the best one to have. Now at this point, we've got an open suffix, no open prefixes, and we've got really nothing to do with it. So our only real option is to slam a Redeemer Exalt. This is a fairly cheap thing to do, and it does have an option to give us to pay out pretty heavily. So looking at the actual modifiers that are possible to roll when we do that, if we look at Sceptres, we've actually pretty good odds. So looking at Redeemer here, we could actually hit chance to inflict cold exposure, and this build is very socket starved, so we don't actually get access to exposure easily, such as say a frost bomb or something like that. So this is actually quite good, and this is a 1 in 5 chance to hit. Now, one of the rarest modifier is this Auras from skills, and this is actually bad. Now we have spells deal double damage, which is a 1 in 5 to hit, and guess what? This is actually solid. Essentially, double damage is 1% more damage, so if you hit this mod here of 6 to 7% double damage, you essentially just added 6 to 7% more damage to your build. Of course, we have the best in slot Hatred Aura effect, which is a 1 in 5 as well. The cast speed is completely wasted, as we are a trap throwing speed build, and then of course the movement speed is not great either. So looking at our odds here, we essentially have a 3 in 5.4 chance to hit something which is going to benefit on our build. And of course, we have a 1 in 5.4 chance to hit the best in slot modifiers, and we have a 0.5 in 5.4 chance, so about a 1 in 11 to hit the absolute best in slot of Hatred effect. So realistically speaking, our odds are absolutely not bad here. Now this is how we would end the Sceptre, and as you can see, boom, just like that, T1 Hatred Aura effect. We've got ourselves a very good endgame weapon, which we are probably not going to have to actually upgrade for the longest time. Now, what if you actually wanted a mirror tier Sceptre, something that is truly beautiful? It's going to be a little bit different. So we're going to go ahead and head back to the point where we had just the +1 all spells on our Sceptre, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to craft on prefixes cannot be changed, and this is a suffix for 1 exalt. Now, when we craft on prefixes cannot be changed, after that we are going to Aisling, which is a T4 Aisling. And because we have prefixes cannot be changed, it is impossible to hit the +1 all spells, right? You're always going to hit the prefixes cannot be changed. Now, the next thing that we need to do when we Aisling and figure out if we veiled a prefix or a suffix. If we veil the suffix, we are just going to simply unveil it, and we're going to look for any modifier which does not have a caster tag. Now, if you're not aware of which modifiers have which tags, you can hover over to PoEDB, and under the veiled suffix, you can see all of the different tags that you can see. So in our case, for example, we can see that Strength and Intelligence alongside Critical Strike Chance, which is right here, does not have a caster tag. So we could choose that, and then we could go on and do the same little trick of cannot roll caster annul. This is going to guarantee that we don't have to do, for example, prefixes cannot be changed scour, which would cost us 2 exalt. Instead, it's simply going to cost us 5 blessed orbs. Now, again, we're going to craft on cannot roll, prefixes cannot be changed, and we are going to Aisling. Now, we're going to do that until we get a veiled prefix. Now, when we do get a veiled prefix, we are going to craft on physical damage on the bench. Now, the reason why we actually craft on physical damage, and it doesn't matter if it's with blind, if it's with any of them, right? The reason why we craft this physical damage hybrid modifier is that if we look at veiled modifiers here, physical alongside some sort of hybrid has a 2000 weighting to actually spawn. If we craft on physical on our scepter, when we unveil, it is impossible to unveil this modifier, which means it's completely blocked, which greatly increases the odds of getting something that we do want. And this is why we do not augment Fizz prior to the unveil if we're going for true endgame Sceptre. Now, once we have the veiled prefix, we're going to unveil it, and we're going to look for anything that is, beneficial to us, which is going to be pretty much either cold damage, non-chaos as extra chaos, or spell damage. So there's 3 possible unveils which are considered good. Everything else is bad. So in this case, we didn't unveil anything good. So what we're going to do is we're going to look for a modifier which does not have a caster tag. Once again, you could look at which tags are there, and we are going to choose that so that we can once again take advantage of our nice little cannot roll caster modifier annul strategy to always keep our +1 spell safe. Okay, so eventually you do this and you're going to end up with a veiled modifier which is good for you. So for example, cold damage, chance to freeze, that's perfectly fine. Spell damage, mana regen, that's perfectly fine. Fire damage is not ideal, but it could work, but realistically speaking, I would not keep that, especially if you're going for something as good as this. And then, of course, once in a while, we're going to hit the absolute best in slot, which is non-chaos as extra chaos. Now, once we get to the point where we have +1 spell with non-chaos as extra chaos, we are going to go back to our cannot roll attack modifiers and slam with the harvest augment physical, and this is going to make it so our prefixes are done. Now, we once again have a couple different options in terms of how we want to finish our suffixes. We could just craft on multi and then slam on the Redeemer Exalt, but realistically speaking, there would be no real reason to do that, as you would be wondering, why did you even go through the trouble of unveiling for just a tiny bit of additional spell damage? We want to have something that is truly good and endgame viable. And truly beautiful. So we're going to craft on prefixes cannot be changed, and then we're going to head over to harvest, and we're going to reforge critical. Now, when we do this, we reforge critical, we're going to be looking for critical strike multiplier. So we are going to do this until we get a tier which we are happy with, and this is 2 exalt every single time. But let's just say, for example, we hit T2 critical strike multiplier. Now, looking at the actual odds of this, so if I look for critical modifiers on a scepter, you will see that there is critical strike chance to spells, critical strike chance, and critical strike multiplier. So there's 18,000 weighting that are possible when doing this, and the only one that you care about is this one, and of course probably T2 or above, so 2 and 18, which means it will take you about 9 attempts to get something like T2 or above critical strike multiplier when doing this, which is about 18 exalts, plus when you do fill up your suffixes, you'll have to do reforge keeping prefixes, which is another exalt, so fairly expensive. But at that point, let's just say you hit T2 and you're happy with this, right? Then what you're going to do is you're going to craft on cannot roll caster modifier. Now, cannot roll caster modifier is in order to block all of the caster modifiers on the Redeemer Exalt to increase your odds of getting hatred effect. Now, note that when you do this, you're going to block the opportunity to roll spells have chance to deal double damage, which is quite good, but you're also going to block the cast speed, which is absolutely horrible and useless for us. Which is why it's a bit of a trade-off, but if you're going for hatred or effect, this is by far the best way to go, because you'll end up blocking 2,000 weighting in 5.4k, which means you'll end up with a 1,000 out of 3,400 chance to actually roll this, which is overall quite solid. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to craft on cannot roll caster modifiers, and we're going to just hit it with a Redeemer Exalt, and in this case, we got the move speed, which is bad. We got the auras, which is not great. In this case, we got the hatred aura effect, and that's pretty good. Now, at that point, we just go ahead and craft on the trap throwing speed, and our scepter would officially be done. And this is essentially what you'd look for in a true endgame, pretty much perfect scepter. Now, let's go ahead and run through the cost of this real quick. So, all spells, skill gems, all physical spells, skill gems, and then what I'll do is I'll do a count of either increased cold damage, right? I think it comes with chance to freeze, but that's okay. We'll just do 70 there. Or spell damage. Spell damage here of 70. And then, of course, also we are looking for non-chaos as extra chaos. Non-chaos damage is extra chaos damage. So any of these. And then we are going to be looking also for critical strike multiplier. right? So these are the things that are absolutely guaranteed, right? The spell damage or the cold damage or the non-chaos, the +2 and the crit multi, and of course the trap throwing speed, right? So these are the things that are completely guaranteed. What's not guaranteed is the hatred or effect. Now, looking at the price of one of these scepters, I guess I messed something up. Let's see, what did I mess up? All spells, all physical spells. Oh, all physical spells, skill gems. There we go. Looking at the price of something like this, you can see that this is about 25 exalts. Now, going through the actual price to make it yourself, I would say that this is actually quite a good deal, because the ultra rolling for +1 spells is going to be something like 3 exalts. The augment is something like 7, right? As we said, we need the cannot roll cast or attack modifier, sorry. So we're looking at roughly what, like 3 + 8. So that's 11 exalts, and then you have to do the prefix cannot be changed Ashling, which is a 50-50. You'll have to do that twice. That's another 4 exalts, and then you have to unveil something that's actually good, which is probably about a 50-50 as well. So you have to do that twice. So that's another 8 exalts technically. So we are looking at around somewhere around this cost if you were to make it yourself, which is why they're priced accordingly. It's probably a little bit cheaper than that, to be honest, if you were to make it yourself all the way through. And the good thing about making it yourself is you have the chance of actually hitting the hatred or effect. And if you do hit the hatred or effect, right, in a world where you actually hit that on the slam, which is completely possible, then you're looking at a scepter which is very, very, very expensive, which is why we're going to go with that. Now, of course, this critical strike multiplier, I guess what I could do just to be a little bit more accurate with my search is look for multiplier while a rare or unique enemy is nearby. Because that's an unveil that's possible. If you actually start with the Takati's base, you can unveil for that instead of unveiling for the spell damage prefix. So that's something that's also possible. So let's look at the price of something like that. As you can see, the price goes down a little bit if you actually end up with the Takati's base with this, because the baseline of crit multiplier is worth more than this one, because this only works while a rare unique enemy is nearby. Now, realistically speaking, they're basically just as powerful, and there's no real difference, because when you actually need that crit multi, you're going to be next to a rare or unique enemy. But that's essentially what you'd be looking for in terms of these, super endgame weapons. Now, again, these are technically a mirror tier, but you should never ever mirror any of these scepters, even if they have T1 across the board. They're just simply never worth it, because they're very easy to make. Realistically speaking, you could just kind of make one, right? Go to the point where you have to slam for the hatred or effect. And guess what? If you don't hit it, you just make another one, you sell that one for a profit, you make another one, and you do that until you hit the T1 hatred or effect, and then you can claim that you have a mirror tier scepter, but realistically speaking, no one should ever be mirroring any of these scepters. But they are still great value, and the amount of damage that they add to this build is insane. Matter of fact, I believe that each one of these scepters is adding something like 40% more damage to my build. So it's truly outrageous how much damage they give you, especially that hatred or effect mod by itself is insane. Okay, that's pretty much it for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Before I go, I want to say a huge thank you to my supporters: Jaden and Rocky, Max, Mist, HKMZ, Thomas Mass, Mercury, Solomonk, Alex, the Great Master, Nate, Tim, the other Alex, the third Alex, as well as Nailed, Talismar, Anto Drago 99, Vaith, and Bizen. Anybody else who has supported me in the past, and anyone else who wishes to remain anonymous. Hopefully this was informative, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.